A half moon glowed on smooth granite boulders, turning them silver. The silence was broken only by the ripple of water from the swift black river and the whisper of the trees in the forest beyond. There was a stirring in the shadows, and from all around, lithe dark shapes crept stealthily over the rocks. Unsheathed claws glinted in the moonlight. Wary eyes flashed like amber, and then, as if on silent signal, the creatures leapt at each other, and suddenly the rocks were alive with wrestling, screeching cats. At the center of the frenzy of fur and claws, a massive tabby pinned a bracken-colored tom to the ground and drew up his head triumphantly. "Oakheart!" the tabby growled. "How dare you hunt in our territory? The Sunning Rocks belong to ThunderClan!" "After tonight, Tiger Claw, this will be just another River Clan hunting ground," the bracken-colored tom spat back. A warning yowl came from the shore, and thrilled and anxious. "Look out! More River Clan warriors are coming!" Tiger Claw turned to see sleek, wet bodies sliding out of the water below the rocks. The drenched River Clan warriors bounded silently up the shore and hurled themselves into battle without even stopping to shake the water from their fur. The dark tabby glared down at Oakheart. "You may swim like otters, but you and your warriors do not belong in this forest." He drew back his lips and showed his teeth as the cat struggled beneath him. The desperate scream of a ThunderClan she-cat rose above the clamor. A weary River Clan tom had pinned the warrior flat on her belly. Now he lunged toward her neck with jaws still dripping from his swim across the river. Tiger Claw heard the cry and let go of Oakheart. With a mighty leap, he knocked the enemy warrior away from the she-cat. "Quick, Master, run!" he ordered before turning on the River Clan tom who had threatened her. Master scrambled to her paws, wincing from a deep gash on her shoulder, and raced away. Behind her, Tiger Claw spat with rage as the River Clan tom sliced open his nose. Blood blinded him for an instant, but he lunged forward regardless and sank his teeth into the hind leg of his enemy. The River Clan squealed and struggled free. "Tiger Claw!" a yell from a warrior with a tail as red as a fox. "This is useless. There are too many River Clan warriors." "No, Red Tail. ThunderClan will never be beaten," Tiger Claw yelled back, leaping to Red Tail's side. "This is our territory." Blood was welling around his broad black muzzle, and he shook his head impatiently, scattering scarlet drops on the rocks. "ThunderClan will honor your courage, Tiger Claw, but we cannot afford to lose any more of our warriors," Red Tail urged. "Blue Star will never accept her warriors to fight against these impossible odds. We will have another chance to avenge this defeat." He met Tiger Claw's amber-eyed gaze steadily, then reared away, sprang onto a boulder at the edge of the trees. "Retreat! ThunderClan, retreat!" he yowled. At once his warriors squirmed and struggled away from their opponents. Sprinting and snarling, they backed toward Red Tail for a heartbeat. The River Clans looked confused. Was this battle so easily won? Then Oakheart yelled a jubilant cry. As soon as they heard him, the River Clan warriors raised their voices and joined their deputy in their caterwauling their victory. Red Tail looked down at his warriors. With the flick of his tail, he gave the signal, and the ThunderClan's cats dived down the far side of Sunning Rocks, then disappeared into the trees. Tiger Claw followed last. He hesitated at the edge of the forest and glanced back at the blood-stained battlefield. His face was grim, his eyes furious slits. Then he leaped after his clan into the silent forest. In a deserted clearing, a gray old she-cat sat alone, staring up at the clear night sky. All around her, in the shadows, she could hear the breathing and stirring of sleeping cats. A small tortoiseshell she-cat emerged from a dark corner, her paw steps quick and soundless. The gray she-cat dipped her head in greeting. "How is Mouse Fur?" she meowed. "Her wounds are deep, Blue Star," answered the tortoiseshell, settling herself on the night cool grass. "But she is young and strong. She will heal quickly." "And the others?" "They will all recover too." Blue Star sighed. "We are lucky not to have lost any of our warriors this time. You are a gifted medicine cat, Spotted Leaf." She tilted her head again and studied the stars. "I am deeply troubled by tonight's defeat. ThunderClan has not been beaten in its own territory since I became leader," she murmured. "These are difficult times for our clans. The season of New Leaf is late, and they're having fewer kits. ThunderClan needs more warriors if it is to survive." "But the year is only just beginning," Spotted Leaf pointed out calmly. "There will be more kits than when Greenleaf comes." The gray cat twitched her broad shoulders. "Perhaps, but training our young to become warriors takes time. If ThunderClan is to defend its territory, it must have new warriors as soon as possible." "Are you asking StarClan for answers?" meowed the Spotted Leaf, gently following Blue Star's gaze and staring up at the swath of stars glittering in the dark sky. "It is at times like these we need the words of ancient warriors to help us." "Has StarClan spoken to you?" Blue Star asked. "Not for some moons, Blue Star." Suddenly, a shooting star blazed over the tree tops. Spotted Leaf's tail twitched and the fur along her spine bristled. Blue Star's ears pricked, but she remained silent as Spotted Leaf continued to gaze upward. After a few moments, Spotted Leaf lowered her head and turned to Blue Star. "It was a message from StarClan," she murmured. A distant look came into her eyes. "Fire alone can save our clan." "Fire?" Blue Star echoed. "A fire is feared by all the clans. How can it save us?" Spotted Leaf shook her head. "I do not know," she admitted. "This is the message StarClan has chosen to share with me." The ThunderClan leader fixed her clear blue eyes on the medicine cat. "You have never been wrong before, Spotted Leaf," she meowed. "If StarClan has spoken, then it must be so. Fire will save our clan." Chapter 1. It was very dark. Rusty could sense something was near. The young tomcat's eyes opened wide as he scanned the dense undergrowth. This place was unfamiliar, but the strange sense drew him onward, deeper into the shadows. His stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He opened his jaws silently to let the warm smells of the forest reach the scent glands on the roof of his mouth. Most musty odors of leaf molds mingled with the tempering aroma of a small furry creature. Suddenly, a flush of gray raced past him. Rusty stopped still, listening. It was hiding in the leaves, less than 2 tail lengths away. Rusty knew it was a mouse. He could feel the rapid pulsing of a tiny heartbeat deep within his ear fur. He swallowed, stifling his rambling stomach. Soon his hunger would be satisfied. Slowly he lowered his body into position, crouching for the attack. He was downwind of the mouse. He knew it was not aware of him. With one final check on his prey's position, Rusty pushed past back hard on his haunches and sprang, kicking up leaves on the forest floor as he rose. The mouse dived for cover, heading toward the hole in the ground, but Rusty was already on top of it. He scooped it into the air, hooking the helpless creature with his thorn-sharp claws, flinging it up in a high arc onto the leaf-covered ground. The mouse landed dazed, but alive. It tried to run, but Rusty snatched it up again. He tossed the mouse once more, this time a little farther away. The mouse managed to scramble a few paces before Rusty caught up with it. Suddenly a noise roared nearby. Rusty looked around, and as he did so, the mouse was able to pull away from his claws. When Rusty turned back, he saw it dart into the darkness and the tangled roots of a tree. Angry, Rusty gave up the hunt. He spun around, his green eyes glaring, intent on searching out the noise that had cost him his kill. The sound rattled on, becoming more familiar. Rusty blinked open his eyes. The forest had disappeared. He was inside a hot, airless kitchen. Curled in his bed, moonlight filtered through the window, casting shadows on the smooth, hard floor. The noise had been the rattle of hard, dried pellets of food as they were tipped into his dish. Rusty had been dreaming. Lifting his head, he rested his chin on the side of his bed. His collar rubbed uncomfortably around his neck. In his dream, he had felt fresh air riffling as a soft fur where collar usually pinched. Rusty rolled onto his back, savoring the dream for a few more moments. He could still smell the mouse. It was the third time since full moon that he'd had the dream, and every time the mouse had escaped his grasp. He licked his lips from his bed as he could smell the bland odor of his food. His owners always refilled his dish before they went to bed. The dusty smell chased away the warm sense of his dream, but the hunger rambled in his stomach, so Rusty stretched the sleep out his limbs and padded across the kitchen floor to his dinner. The food felt dry and tasteless on his tongue. Rusty reluctantly swallowed one more mouthful. Then he turned away from the food dish and pushed his way through the cat flap, hoping that the smell of the garden would bring back the feelings from his dream. Outside, the moon was bright. It was raining lightly. Rusty stalked around the tidy garden, following the star-lit gravel path. He felt the stones cold and sharp beneath his paws. He made his dirt beneath a large bush with glossy green leaves and heavy purple flowers. Their sticky, sweet scent cloyed the damp air around him, and he curled his lips to drive the smell out of his nostrils. Afterward, Rusty settled down on top of one of the posts in the fence that marked the limits of his garden. It was a favorite spot of his, as he could see right into the neighborhood gardens as well, and into the dense green forest on the other side of his garden fence. The rain had stopped. Behind him, the close-cropped lawn was bathed in moonlight, but beyond his fence, the woods were full of shadows. Rusty stretched his head forward to take a sniff of the damp air. His skin was warm and dry under his thick coat, but he could feel the weight of the raindrops as it sparkled on his ginger fur. He heard his owners giving him one last call from the back door. If he went to them now, they would greet him with gentle words and caress and welcome him onto their bed, where he would curl purring warm in the crook of a bent knee. But this time, Rusty ignored his owner's voices and turned his gaze back into the forest. The crisp smell of the woods had grown fresher than after the rain. Suddenly, the fur on his spine prickled. Was something moving out there? Was something watching him? Rusty stared ahead, but it was impossible to see or smell anything dark in the dark tree-scented air. He lifted his chin boldly, stood up, and stretched, one paw gripping each corner of the fence post as he straightened his legs and arched his back. He closed his eyes and breathed in the smell of the woods once more. It seemed to promise him something, tempting him onward into the whispering shadows. Tensing his muscles, he crouched for a moment. Then he leaped lightly onto the rough grass on the other side of the garden fence. As he landed, the bell on his collar rang out through the still night air. "Where are you off to, Rusty?" meowed a familiar voice behind him. Rusty looked up. A young black and white cat was balancing ungracefully on the fence. "Hello, Smudge," Rusty replied. "You're not going into the woods, are you?" The Smudge's amber eyes were huge. "Just for a look," Rusty promised, shifting uncomfortably. "You wouldn't get me in there. It's dangerous." The Smudge wrinkled his black nose with distaste. "Henry said he went into the woods once." The cat lifted his head and gestured with his nose over at the rows of fence towards the garden where Henry lived. "That fat old tabby never went into the woods," Rusty scoffed. "He's hardly been beyond his own garden fence since his trip to the vet. All he wants to do is eat and sleep." No, really, he caught a robin there," Smudge insisted. "Well, if he did, then it was before the vet. Now he complains about birds because they disturb his dozing." "Well, anyway," Smudge went on, ignoring the scorn in Rusty's mew, "Henry told me that there was all sorts of dangerous animals out there. Huge wildcats who eat live rabbits for breakfast and sharpen their claws on old bones." "I'm only going to go for a look," Rusty meowed. "I won't stay long." "Well, don't say I didn't warn you," purred Smudge. The black and white cat turned and plunged off the fence back down into his own garden. Rusty sat down in the coarse grass beyond the garden fence. He gave his shoulders a nervous lick and wondered how much the Smudge gossip was true. Suddenly, the movement of a tiny creature caught his eye. He watched it scuttle under some brambles. Instinct made him drop into a low crouch. With one slow paw after another, he drew his body forward through the undergrowth. Ears pricked, nostrils flared, eyes unblinking, he moved toward the animal. He could see it clearly now, sitting among the barbed branches, nibbling on a large seed held between its paws. It was a mouse. Rusty rocked his haunches from side to side, preparing to leap. He held his breath in case his bell rang again. Excitement coursed through him, making his heart pound. This was even better than his dreams. Then a sudden noise of cracking twigs and crunching leaves made him jump. His bell jangled treacherously, and the mouse darted away into the thickest tangle of bramble bush. Rusty stood still and looked around. He could see the white tip of the red bushy tail trailing through the clump of tall ferns up ahead. He smelled a strong, strange scent, definitely a meat eater, but neither cat nor dog. Distracted, Rusty forgot about the mouse and watched the red tail curiously. He wanted a better look. All of Rusty's senses strained ahead as he prowled forward. Then he detected another noise. It was from behind him, but sounded muted and distant. He swiveled his ears backward to hear it better. Possums, he wondered? But he kept his eyes fixed on the strange red fur up ahead. continued to creep onward. It was only when the faint rustling behind him became a loud, fast-approaching leaf crackle that Rusty realized he was in danger. The creature hit him like an explosion, and Rusty was thrown sideways into a clump of nettles. Twisting and yowling, he tried to throw off the attacker and had fastened itself onto his back. It was gripping him with incredibly sharp claws. Rusty could feel spiked teeth at his neck. He writhed and squirmed from whisker to tail, but he couldn't free himself. For a second he felt helpless, and he froze. Thinking fast, he flipped over onto his back. He knew instinctively how dangerous it was to expose his soft belly, but it was his only chance. He was lucky. The ploy seemed to work. He heard a "hook" behind him as the breath was knocked out of his attacker. Thrashing fiercely, Rusty managed to wriggle free. Without looking back, he sprinted toward his house, his home. Behind him, a rush of paw steps told Rusty his attacker was giving chase. Even though the pain from his scratches stung beneath his fur, Rusty decided he would rather turn and fight than let himself be jumped on again. Skidded to a stop, spun around, and faced his pursuer. It was another kitten, with a thick coat of shaggy gray fur, strong legs, and bold, broad face and a heartbeat. Rusty smelled that it was a tom, and sensed the power of the sturdy shoulders beneath the soft coat. Then the kitten crashed into Rusty at full pelt, taken by surprise. By Rusty's turnabout, it fell back into a dazed heap. The impact knocked the breath out of Rusty, and he staggered. He quickly found his footing and arched his back, puffing out his orange chest, ready to spring onto the other kitten. But his attacker simply sat up and began to lick his forepaw. All signs of aggression gone. Rusty felt strangely disappointed. Every part of him was tense, ready for battle. "Hi there, kitty pet," meowed the gray tom cheerily. "You put up quite a fight there for a tame kitty." Rusty remained on tiptoe for a second, wondering whether to attack anyway. Then he remembered the strength he had felt in the kitten's paws when he had pinned him to the ground. He dropped onto his pads and loosened his muscles, and let his spine unbend. "And I'll fight you again if I have to," he growled. "I'm Graypaw, by the way," the gray kitten went on, ignoring Rusty's threat. "I'm training to be a ThunderClan warrior." Rusty remained silent. He didn't understand what this gray what's-it was meowing about, but he sensed the threat had passed. He hid his confusion by leaning down to lick his ruffled chest. "What's a kitty pet like you doing out in the woods? Don't you know it's dangerous?" asked Graypaw. "If you're the most dangerous thing in the woods has to offer, then I think I can handle it," Rusty bluffed. Graypaw looked at him for a moment, narrowing his big yellow eyes. "Oh, I'm far from the most dangerous. If I were even half a warrior, I'd be giving an intruder like you some real wounds to think about." Rusty felt a thrill of fear at these ominous words. What did his cat mean by intruder? "Anyway," meowed Graypaw, using his sharp teeth to tug a clump of grass from beneath his claws. "I don't think it was
Homework?